Something I feel hasn't gotten enough attention recently is this investigation into the autopen and the cover up that Comer is doing right now. I think because of the big, beautiful bill, a lot of people aren't discussing it as much as they need to. What do you think is going to come from this investigation? Do you think when they call Karine Jean-Pierre that we're going to learn anything new from her when she gets called in?
Look, I think it will really depend on if any of these myriad people that James Comer is calling to testify before the Oversight Committee behind closed doors at the moment,
Mm-hmm.
whether any of them decide that they need to be more patriotic than loyal to Joe Biden and actually describe what was going on behind closed doors, because there was so much about Joe Biden that was hidden, and it was hidden by just a handful of kind of Biden loyalists. Particularly, I say that Jill Biden and her factotum, a man by the name of Anthony Bernal, they really did a great job of isolating Joe Biden from the rest of the White House staff and his advisors, and certainly from his cabinet, and I mean, other Democrats in Congress, um, because they knew, I guess, that his cognitive decline was so sharp, and so sort of shocking, that if anyone saw him like they saw him up close and personal every day, that he would probably at some point be removed from office. And that was something that Jill Biden was certainly not going to abide.
Absolutely. So we keep hearing about this guy, Anthony Bernal. I think a lot of us who weren't really aware of him in the past, we keep hearing about him, and he did not want to come in of his own volition. He's now been subpoenaed to come in and testify. Can you explain who exactly Anthony Bernal is to the Biden family, to Jill Biden? Because we've heard that he is her work husband. I think it's weird when people use that term, work husband, work wife. Who would you say Anthony Bernal is to the family?
Well, you're absolutely right, Link. That is what Jill Biden has called Anthony Bernal. She said, he is my work husband. He is a former child actor from Arizona. He made his way to
Okay.
DC and inveigled his way into Jill Biden's good books by, I guess he's very clever, by sort of remaking her image when she was second lady, when she was the wife of the vice president under Obama, and he stuck to her like a limpet throughout. And then when they had the 2020 campaign, he came back on board, and he was one of the only staffers allowed into their Wilmington house, allowed into Joe Biden's basement. Remember, during
Mm.
COVID, during the pandemic, Joe Biden managed to hide from the public and do very limited campaign appearances because he used the excuse of COVID. And he was in his very expensive, I think it's mahogany lined or oak lined, um, bespoke basement. It's actually his library
Yes.
in his lakefront mansion. And Anthony Bernal was there every day. He moved to Wilmington so that he could be with the First Lady and with Joe Biden. So they came to trust him. And so he knows all the secrets. If he were to spill the beans, I think we would rip the lid off this scandal. But I have a feeling that he's very loyal and that he won't do that.
Well, do you think he's still working with Jill Biden on a day-to-day basis, or has he gone off to do consulting and other work in, some swampy capacity? Is he still working with her, do you think? I mean, I imagine he will be loyal, but maybe he'll give us a little bit or a tidbit of something we can run with, Miranda.
Look, we have not seen hide nor hair of him. Maybe he's gone back to
Hmm.
Arizona. He certainly hasn't been showing up in Wilmington,
Yes.
where apparently the Bidens are quite shocked at how reviled they are, even in their
Mm.
hometown. They should have got a little glimpse of that when Hunter Biden was convicted by a jury of Delawareans in their hometown of Wilmington. And they were not at all impressed, the jurors, by the fact that Jill Biden would swan in with Bernal by her side, the diminutive Bernal. She's not very tall, but
Hmm.
he's a lot shorter than her. And she would swan in her great finery that he used to dress her. He got her those Vogue covers. She was quite well turned out by the end. And she would come in with her entourage and her Secret Service motorcade. And I'd sit in the front row, and I guess she thought it would somehow impress the jurors, but they, I noticed, studiously did not look at her throughout the trial. And in fact, at the end, the prosecutors said, waving over to the front row, you should not pay any attention to what's going on there. Basically the power that's manifest in the front row in the form of the First Lady. Um,
Right.
you should just judge on the evidence, which is exactly what they did. So I guess her plan didn't work.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Jill Biden is going to go down in history as one of the most unlikable figures. Like, she just seems to me like this power hungry woman. And I felt that way with the debate last year, right? We're about 365 days away from that debate. But I don't know a woman who loves and respects her husband and would allow him to go out on stage in the shape he was in. I mean, what do you think, Miranda, about Jill Biden? Was she the one who was power hungry? Hunter was power hungry, pushing daddy to stay in the race, even though they knew he was cognitively impaired?
Totally, I completely agree with you. I mean, it's just cruel. Look,
Hmm.
I do think Joe Biden is the architect of his own demise ultimately,
Hmm.
and he was not, he was non-compos mentis for some of the time, but everybody around him and anyone who knows about these kind of cognitive illnesses or frailties knows that you have good days and bad days, good hours and bad hours. So I think he had enough times of rationality to be held responsible. However, his wife did not act like, for instance, Nancy Reagan did. She was always at her husband's side, at Ronald Reagan's side, making sure that his dignity was always intact and that he was looked after. Whereas, I mean, throughout Joe Biden's presidency, you saw him wandering around lost, just completely out of it. And where was his wife? You would think that she would at least tell the staff not to let him be photographed and videotaped in that
Hmm.
kind of state. And then there were a few little vignettes that we saw, like at one stage they were on the tarmac getting off Marine One, the helicopter, and he couldn't find the arm in his jacket to put his jacket on. And she just sort of rolls her eyes and comes over and, with a grimace, just helps him on and then stalks
Right.
off. She wasn't happy. I mean, she's not, I don't think, I don't know her, but you can piece together anecdotes about her and stories, and you've just observed the way she behaved during her public time. She had actually 12 years as
Right.
either the first lady or the second lady. And you can see that she's very self-engrossed and power mad. And you mentioned the
Hmm.
debate. I mean, how embarrassing that after the debate, he goes to, a watch party and gives this sort of meandering speech after he'd collapsed. And then she gets up and she goes, "Oh, Joe, you did so great. You
Yes.
talked like she's talking to a little boy who's just gone on the potty."
Yeah. No, exactly. It was like, you did so good, Joe. You answered
Yeah.
all the questions. It's like, is
Yeah.
that where the bar is? That he answered some questions? That's where the bar is. And what I find so hypocritical, and I know you do too as a columnist, is when people say, oh my God, President Trump is a threat to democracy. No kings, no kings. What about the
No.
threat to democracy that we had this shadow government of folks like Anthony Bernal and all of these advisors calling the shots, while Joe Biden, according to reporting from Axios, was basically done at 4 o'clock every single day?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was the American Politburo, this
Hmm.
handful of advisors who were feathering their own nest. They wanted to preserve their power and prestige, their access to, the private helicopter, the private plane, the White House residence, and all the power and prestige that goes with that, as well as Camp David. all the trappings that come from being associated with the president so closely and having him depend on you
Mhm.
not to go and spill the beans to the public about what's happening, depending on you just to do his job for him. It's really wrong. And it's actually criminal fraud. I was speaking
Right.
to John Woo, and he was saying that if if Comer and Co. can prove that people were using the autopen when Joe Biden to sign executive orders and pardons and so on, when Joe Biden wasn't aware, wasn't compos mentis, didn't know what was going on, then that is fraud and they could go to jail for it.
Absolutely. No, it does seem fraudulent. And also, you can only gaslight the American people so much to tell us, don't believe what you're seeing with your own eyes. I mean, there were people deplatformed, silenced, served subpoenas, all because they were reporting on the fact that Joe Biden was in decline. And they kept going out there and talking like the guy was doing cartwheels
Yeah.
in private. And Karine Jean-Pierre was one of those people.